Arovis Martinez got called up to AAA by the Toronto Blue Jays, and things are about to get very interesting on the 40-man roster. There's players that the Jays have shown reluctancy to get rid of, and there are some players on the open market that they might want to add before the trade deadline. So we'll break that down and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse, and I'm once again on the move. I'm at work. I always got to find a place to make one of these videos, and Nick always has his comfortable little spot that he's doing those videos in. So shout out to you, Nick. I'm kind of jealous. I'm always on the move here, but I guess that kind of adds to the part that we're playing here. But a lot of different talk has been surrounding the Toronto Blue Jays heading into this deadline. There's a lot of additions that they could make. There's a lot of subtractions that they would need to make if they were to make those additions. So it's very interesting and a lot of speculation around the Blue Jays this time of year.
Yeah, tons of rumors are heating up. Trade rumors, signing rumors. There's some crazy stuff going around in the league. Make sure to subscribe before we get into the video. We're on the road to 7,500. And let's just get into the first and kind of the main report that kind of stemmed this before anything else, which is Arovis Martinez is expected to be promoted to AAA in the coming days, according to Shai Davidi. And this was obviously 2 days ago on Wednesday. And Arovis Martinez is a guy that started off the minor league season. His first 15 games was about as unlucky and as bad as you could have gotten. He was hitting, I don't know the exact number, I think it was below 100, but his last game since then has been unbelievable. He's completely heated up, and he's a guy who the Blue Jays might, be forced to call up, maybe not this year, but next year. But Peter, he has been on an absolute hot streak, and like you said earlier, that 40-man roster is starting to, it's full. Someone needs to be dropped, and the Jays are going to make some moves here coming shortly.
Right. Now, he's already on the 40-man roster, luckily for the Toronto Blue Jays. So if he were to force their hand and have to come up this season, then that's an easy fix. You just got to release someone from the active roster or option someone down. But I don't think it's going to happen this year, not as long as Matt Chapman is on the Blue Jays and playing third base every day, which I'm fine with at the current moment. I do think Arovis Martinez and or Addison Barger could be the solutions going forward if Matt Chapman were to walk in free agency, and it's looking more and more likely by the day, Nick. But the guys that we're talking about here are Thomas Hatch, Mitch White, Adam Sibber, who's currently on the 15-day injured list. Those guys you're going to have to make decisions with if you're Ross Atkins, because you have Hyunjin Ryu coming back from Tommy John, as well as Chad Green coming back right around at the same time. So you're going to have to release or send a couple of guys down from your 40-man roster and make room for them, because they're going to eat some valuable innings down the stretch of the year.
Yeah, and it just seems like a move is going to be made one way or another. And this report also dropped today, and we have an article to discuss as well. This dropped about 3 hours ago from Ben Nicholson-Smith, saying that as the Blue Jays consider ways to add offensively, they've shown some interest in Nelson Cruz, who is 43 years of age and is a free agent after being designated, for a sign by the Padres. And he discussed how the Jays are thorough in interest doesn't mean there's going to be traction towards anything. They've just shown interest in a lot of players, and obviously he has other options too. But Nelson Cruz is a guy that is kind of past his prime. A lot of Blue Jays fans aren't really happy about this report, but it kind of goes back to the fact that guys like Thomas Hatch and other players you mentioned that are taking up spots in the roster that aren't really being utilized, it might be time to let them go, cut the ties, and get someone who the Jays have a good record, 40-51. They need to push for that wild card spot, and getting some more impact guys will actually have an impact this season is something that the Jays need to do. And it seems like, according to reports and all the reporters, that the Jays are going to make some sort of move here soon.
You may have made some Jays fans panic right there. You said 40-41. I'm going to correct you. It's 50-41, so it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's still 9 games over 500, so a pretty decent first half for the Blue Jays. And they actually have a better record through 91 games than they did through 91 games last season, and they ended up squeaking into the playoffs. And unfortunately, we know what happened after that. But I do believe that this team is going to make some additions. They are going to get better past the deadline. And we also got to account for some players performing up to their standard as well, because a lot of players have not really been themselves throughout the first half of the season. And the Jays are still looking like a pretty decent team thus far. So obviously things got to iron themselves out, got to make some additions. But when it comes to Nelson Cruz, especially looking at the way that this team is constructed, I think they'd rather go for someone on the open market that can play in the field, that can run the bases, and that can hit both lefties and righties.
I agree, especially with Brandon Belt and the team, who kind of, obviously, he's not a permanent DH or anything, but it handicaps them a little bit more. And let's get into an article here, and this kind of is exactly what we're talking about and kind of touches on some potential targets there. It says, As such, Toronto could use this opportunity to subtract from its 40-man roster via trade, avoiding an impending crunch while planning for future seasons, similar to, of course, the Mets trade. This year's version of that bulk trade could be around, like you said, Trent Thornton, Thomas Hatch, even Adam Simber, two optional pitchers were likely to be on the chopping block. And then, of course, on the player position side, it might be time to consider moving one of Kevin Biggio or Santiago Espinal. And, the Cardinals came out recently and said they're going to be sellers, they're going to be trading, so maybe a guy like Tommy Edman, Paul DeJong, Tyler O'Neill as well are people who could be interested there. But again, we're not going to just release Kevin Biggio or Santiago Espinal. It'll be more of a trade, but it might be time to upgrade those spots. And we've discussed this tons of times. Upgrade the spots of weakness to get something, because it seems like the Blue Jays right now, if they have one guy out or two guys out, you have a lineup consisting of Santiago Espinal and Kevin Biggio at the same time, and you add that on top of Alejandro Kirk, who hasn't hit well at all. It's sometimes a bit of a weak lineup, or at least not a weak lineup, but one that could definitely need some improvement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, those guys just need to simply play better, because another option that you have is to send them down. You could send all three of those guys down to the minor leagues, but that seems so counterproductive on the Toronto Blue Jays side, because Kirk and Espinal were all-stars last year. You've been banking on Biggio having a breakout year for what seems like the past 3 seasons. So it kind of seems like you're giving up on them in a sense if you do send them down to AAA. In favor of one of those guys that we mentioned. But when it comes to the Cardinals as well, I don't think Tommy Edman is going to be available. So Jays fans, I wouldn't get too excited on that front, but it would be phenomenal to see maybe Paul DeJong get added to the squad, or like you said, Tyler O'Neill. But right now, the infield depth is not as great as we thought it would be going into the season. So we've all been talking about a fourth outfielder, someone that can mash lefties, but I'm looking in the infield and seeing some potential spots being filled up there by trade potential or free agents.
Yeah, there's just a lot of moving pieces. The Blue Jays haven't really made a move in a while, and the past couple deadlines, they've been eventful, but they haven't been super impactful, I should say, for the Blue Jays. And this could be a deadline where the Jays stay kind of, in the middle. I know you've kind of discussed that on off camera with me as well, as that might be a year where the Jays just do what they did last year, and similar where you trade, middle chip end prospect for people like relievers. Obviously, we did Anthony Bass and players like that last year, but who knows? This year, the players out there aren't nearly as good as they were in years past. So that means the Blue Jays have to get creative, and maybe that forces them, or at least leans them in the direction of staying with the players that they have. But I don't know. Do you have any quick thoughts on any other potential targets or the direction you think the Jays and Ross Atkins should go before we wrap up here?
I think it all depends how they play coming out of the break. Are they going to come out flat, or are they going to come out re-energized and look like a different team in the second half there? So I've said it before. I've been on record saying that it's all on the players. They got to figure something out. They got to start playing up to their capabilities, up to their abilities, because they just haven't done that in the first half. They're much better than 9 games over 500, in my opinion. And there's no one out there on the market that can move the needle that much for you and change the whole culture of this team. It's the internal guys that need to be better and that need to perform better. And I think they will do that in the second half, but maybe a minor addition here or there will help get them over the hump, because I do think the talent is there. They just need to perform up to standard.
It'll be interesting to see, and it starts with a very fun series tonight facing the Arizona Diamondbacks, who have some players that we, of course, traded away in the Dalton Varsho trade. But thank you guys for watching. Hopefully the Jays make some moves and some exciting things happen for the next couple of weeks. See you guys tomorrow.